Hi, I'm John Lasseter, the director of the movie Cars. My mother was a high school art teacher for 38 years, and I grew up drawing cartoons and drawing constantly. But my dad was a parts manager at a Chevrolet dealership in Whittier, California. I actually worked weekends and then summers. And when I got my driver's license when I was 16, I became the parts delivery boy and drove all over Los Angeles delivering parts. This is in the heyday of the great Chevy muscle cars, the Camaro, the SS396, the Corvettes. I've always loved cars. I'm a big gearhead. But as soon as I knew that people actually did animation for a living, that's what I wanted to do. We came up with the idea for a movie with cars as characters way back in 1996. We were working on the movie A Bug's Life. And the idea started to be floated around of using cars as characters. And I thought this would be perfect for our medium of 3D computer animation. That with our technique of creating the reflections that you see in the paint and the glass and the chrome, the way that the tires look and the mud splattered up on the side, the metal flake paint, we can make them really feel like they're alive. Oh, my. My favorite Disney cartoon of all time is Susie the Little Blue Coupe. And I've loved the way that the great Disney animators brought that car character to life. Joe Ranft, Bob Pauly, Jorn Klubin, and myself immediately started thinking about the idea of doing it in a way that there are no humans in the world. We decided, let's try to make it to where it's a world where just cars are alive. And it was much more fun for us that way. So it was a much bigger challenge. So we started looking at our human world and the car world and finding sort of parallels. And one of the things early on that we thought about is race cars are like athletes in this world. And as I started developing this story, I thought, I want to go see a true NASCAR race. So in October of the year 2000, I went to Charlotte, North Carolina, to the Lowe's Motor Speedway, and I tell you what, that was unbelievable to see the tens of thousands of fans showing up and in this huge track. Now, I'm a big racing fan because I live in Sonoma, California, and NASCAR comes to Sonoma every year for a race at Infineon Raceway. Now, it's a road course, meaning that these cars turn right and left and wind their way through the hills. But it was not really like a classic oval NASCAR race. And so to see these cars and stand there on the other side of the fence and have these cars go by at 180 miles an hour, it just took your breath away. The feeling of this sound, of this power, of this excitement. This is amazing. This is what I'd love to try to get in our movie because I've never seen it, like that before. From that moment on, we became really dedicated with trying to get the authenticity, the details right.
Darryl, 3 cars are tied for the season points lead, heading into the final race of the season. And the winner of this race, Darryl, will win the season title and the Piston Cup.
The next race that I went to was the night race at Bristol, Tennessee. And any NASCAR fan will know this is one of the most unbelievable races that you can possibly go to because it is a half-mile concrete track that has very high banked turns. And there's a stadium that's been built like a quilt, in different parts of the stadium at different times, all around this track that surrounds it completely. And 160,000 fans sit around the stadium. And they have this, it's, hot August nights. It is hot and sticky, and they have this night race there. And it is like, as one of the drivers said, it's like having 43 cars driving around a cereal bowl. The story called for Chick Hicks to cause a huge wreck that he would hope to get Lightning McQueen caught in. And right at around that time we were working on this sequence was April of 2005. And there was a big NASCAR race at Talladega that year. And there was a huge crash at that race where 25 to 30 cars out of 43 were involved in this one wreck. And we had recorded it because we were recording all of the NASCAR races for the last 2 or 3 years, to study for the racing sequences. And we looked at that wreck and really got a lot of reference from that as far as how the smoke is generated from the tires and the wrecks and the crashing and so on.
Wait a second, Darrell. McQueen is in the wreckage.
We wanted to have Lightning McQueen move differently than the other race cars, to actually move with more style. Jim Murphy, our directing animator, had compiled footage from all these different sports. And without question, the athlete that inspired us the most for Lightning McQueen was Michael Jordan. In my first trip to Charlotte, the thing that blew me away more than anything else was the fans that camp in the infield.
While everyone else heads into...
And there on Redneck Hill, in the opening race, we show Redneck Hill. I met two of the most influential guys, on this film for me, the ultimate NASCAR fans, the real Mater and his best friend Larry. Mater is the self-appointed mayor of Redneck Hill in the infield of Lowe's Motor Speedway in Charlotte, North Carolina. And there I witnessed the wagon races, and I witnessed, watching the race from on top of his pickup truck. And there's no better place in the world to see a race than the infield. And I started looking at the motorhomes and the pickup trucks on the infield and started seeing them draped with their flags, draped with the flags of their favorite drivers and the banners and all like that. And then seeing the fans in the stands with the jackets and shirts of their favorite drivers, and started seeing the connection. These are one and the same. And so that's where the idea of having the fans in the infield be motorhomes really came from that very first trip.
No tires, just gas.
In doing the research for this film, we looked at almost every documentary, every movie about cars, and anything we can get our hands on to watch. We looked at these films, and one of the things we noticed is most of the movies made about racing, the filmmakers seemed to do a little research and then kind of just start, doing what they wanted. And so they didn't get the details right. Therefore, it didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel true to what it was. And being a fan, being a geek of cars and racing that I am, I wanted to get the details right. Now, even though these are going to be cartoon characters, I still wanted to get the details right so that the fans, so that the people who work in racing, that work in Detroit, who love cars and any of the automotive subcultures would look at this and go, wow, they did their homework. I took tons of pictures of the track. The people there were fantastic and letting me climb all over the stands and take me onto the track. And we even get, for the NASCAR fans, you'll see coming out of turn 2, we even have the little dip that all the cars go through. It's one of the unique things about the Bristol track. We added that in there. We have the cuts kind of in the concrete where they patched it up later. And we got the color of the concrete exact, the angle. We made the track a mile long, so the straightaways are a little longer than the real Bristol track because we needed that for the staging of the action.
It's too close to call.
And I can tell you right now that I am absolutely the only person in the world that sits and watches the Bristol night race and gets so caught up and geek out over the shadows and the highlights on all the cars. I started looking at the way that this stadium was built, the way the lights are there, and all the shadows. I thought this would be great because one of the things as we were developing the story for Lightning McQueen, the main character, is that he is a young race car that is so focused on his selfish desire to achieve his goals as fast as he possibly can. Nothing else means anything in his life. It's all about him and all about his goals. I thought having the opening race be a night race is a great metaphor, because when you look at the helicopter or the blimp shots of the stadium, you see that the whole surrounding countryside is completely black. You see nothing. The only thing you see is what's inside of that track. And that symbolized McQueen and what his life was like at the beginning of the film. And that's why it was a perfect match to then make that opening race a night race. In this scene, which we call Victory Lane, so many things in our films are actually setups for what happens later. And it's something that as we develop the stories, it takes like years to develop the stories. Once we figure out things that we need to establish at the end of the film, we actually go back in the beginning and try to set things up. And in this scene, one of the key moments in this is actually how McQueen loves to be photographed by the press. They love him and he loves them, and that's what his whole life is about. And later you'll see a scene where this comes back to haunt him. The owner of Dynaco Oil, we wanted to have come off like a Texas millionaire, and we thought, of course, it had to be a Cadillac. The character was inspired by this Cadillac that me and my family saw in Cody, Wyoming on our big motorhome trip. It was advertising the rodeo that happens every night in Cody, but it was a gold Cadillac with these big steer horns, and I thought, that's a great character. The voice of Tex is Humpy Wheeler. Yes, that's his real name, Humpy Wheeler, the president and general manager of Lowe's Motor Speedway in Charlotte, North Carolina. As McQueen talks to the Richard Petty character, the king really sees something in McQueen that he doesn't even see in himself, but tries to give him some advice. Of course, his mind wanders as soon as the king says, "a good team." Richard Petty, the 7-time NASCAR champion, does the voice of the king. When I first met him, I fell in love with the way he naturally said things like lug nut. But the thing that I noticed the most was that huge smile of his. And his character is a 1970 Plymouth Superbird, which has a pointy front, and the mouth is actually hidden underneath. So we rebuilt the mouth because I wanted that smile to look like Richard Petty's real smile. When we first came up with the idea of doing a movie with cars as characters, I got really excited because I love cars and I was kind of starting to geek out about it. And I went home to tell my wife Nancy about this, and she said, "You better make sure that you make this movie, not for yourself and the other car geeks out there, but for me, your nieces, and for the 99% of the world who really don't care about cars." And it's funny. She was right. And throughout the development of the story of Cars, Joe Ranft always called it the Nancy factor. And in fact, we started getting people on our story team like Hugh Murray, and even Joe, for that matter, wasn't that into cars, and getting people who weren't really into cars. And the focus of the story and the development was really not about cars. It was about characters, and it was about story. And that's the thing that we wanted more than anything else, for people to kind of forget that these are cars. They're just true, real characters. The scene where McQueen has to make his personal appearance at his sponsor's tent is very important from a story standpoint because, first of all, it's really fun because we wanted to show that he is a beginning race car and he had kind of the low rent sponsor. These guys have this Rusty's medicated bumper ointment in their new rear end formula. It's kind of like the preparation H for automobiles.
He was so rusty he didn't even cast a shot.
And it was really important to set up how McQueen doesn't like rusty cars. McQueen, in his vision of his future, wanted to be with modern cars, with beautiful cars, with good-looking girls, with shiny cars. He even says, "I hate rusty cars." This is all there to actually set you up for when he first meets Mater. Everything in a Pixar film is there for a reason, to help set up something later in the film, but we never want anything to look like a setup. When we first started Cars, we thought, what better voices to be the sponsors than Tom and Ray Magliozzi, Flick and Clack, the Tapper brothers from NPR's Car Talk. And so it was a perfect opportunity, because it's like this product clearly is made for cars that are rusted out, like you find in the Northeast, where the winter road salt just corrodes the cars. When we were talking to them about them doing a voice in the film, I didn't ask them what kind of car they wanted to be. I asked each brother what the other brother should be. And it ended up they both chose the brother to be a Dodge, which made sense. They're brothers, right? The Dodge brothers. And one is a 64 Dodge Star convertible, and the other one's a 1967 A100 Dodge van. And it's cars that they had. When we first started developing Cars, we knew that music was going to be a major, major part of this film. I wanted lots of great driving songs in this film. And we wanted to actually establish different musical styles for the different places in McQueen's life. In the modern racing world, we wanted to have hard driving rock and roll. We're so lucky to get Sheryl Crow to create a brand new song for us, Real Gone, and it just fits so perfectly with the opening race. In this scene where Mac and Lightning McQueen travel across the country, we went to a classic song from the 80s called Life is a Highway, but we had it re-recorded by my wife Nancy's absolute favorite group, the Rascal Flatts. Pixar's good luck charm is the actor John Ratzenberger. You know, for those who know, he's in every single one of our films, and starting with a Toy Story where he was Ham, the know-it-all piggy bank. I love working with John. And in this movie, we made him Mac, McQueen's driver. Now, John's father was a truck driver all his life, and he drove Mack trucks. Darla K. Anderson, the producer, worked really hard to get Mack truck in the film for John, because we really wanted, him to be Mack truck in honor of his father. I'd worked from about 1990 through 1999 making Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2. Each film took about 4 years to make. Also during that time, I had 4 of my 5 boys. And by the time we were finishing Toy Story 2, my wife, Nancy, came to me and said, be careful, because one day you may wake up and find that your boys have gone off to college and you will have missed it. And she was right. So after Toy Story 2 in the summer of 2000, I took the entire summer off, and we bought a used motorhome, packed my family in it. We went out to the Pacific Ocean, put our feet in the Pacific Ocean, and turned east. We had 2 months to drive to the Atlantic, and our only goal was to get to the Atlantic, put our feet in the Atlantic, and turn around and come back.
Yeah, that would be great. We should totally...
Everyone thought we were going to be at each other's throats, being cooped up in that motorhome for 2 months. But the opposite happened. We got so close as a family, we actually didn't even want to return. When I came back from that trip, I remember walking up to Joe and to Darla and saying, I know what I want this movie to be about a character that learns what I learned this past summer, that the journey in life is a reward. And so that really was the foundation of the story of Lightning McQueen and how we developed it.
You can, Mac. Look, it'll be easy.
I took so many pictures and so many videos on my journey that summer. I remember so many shots on the highways, the interstates traveling across the country. And I kept stopping at the truck stops, thinking about these diesel trucks like they're over there sleeping, because you heard this diesel engine rumbling. It seemed like snoring. And so there's a scene that Mac passes a truck stop, and it's heavily influenced by that journey. As we were doing research for cars, we studied every subculture in the automotive world. And one of the ones that was fascinating to us was what I call the new hot rods. It's how the imports are being modified, being souped up with tremendous horsepower, huge exhausts, and also incredible paint jobs, underlighting, and all that stuff. They were becoming so caricatured that it was just fascinating. And we knew we wanted to have these kind of modified imports in the movie. We came up with this design of these 3 modified imports and kind of an old muscle car that has a huge supercharger, huge blower. We designed the 3 modified imports based upon different styles of cars. And then we went to a car show, and we realized the cars had gotten even more caricatured than the ones we had designed.
Ourselves a nodder.
So we went back and actually had to redesign the fins to make them bigger and the exhaust pipes bigger and on because the modified imports were actually catching up to our caricatured designs. And I said, we better get this movie out quick or else we're going to have to redesign these characters again. And I always looked at the blowers coming out of these muscle cars, and it always reminded me of a huge nose. And I always thought these guys must always have a stuffed nose because of all the gunk that probably goes into this thing. And so that's where the idea of this, the character we call Snot Rod came up, where he's always sneezing.
Gesundheit! One should never drive while drowsy.
NASCAR race cars do not have headlights. They really do just have stickers that represent the headlights. We established this earlier in the Rusty's tent, but here's where it pays off. When he's out on the road in this dark interstate in the middle of nowhere where there's no street lights, even though he is full of himself, he's really not as capable as a regular car because he doesn't have the headlights. He doesn't know where he's going. As I traveled on my cross-country trip, the one thing I noticed as we were traveling at night, how similar the backs of the big diesel trucks and their trailers look with all the clearance lights. And it's the thing we wanted to establish is it's like a maze, a moving maze. He does not know which of these trailers is Mac. Once he gets off of the interstate, heading on the side road, it's getting darker and darker. We wanted a train in the film. Now, there's really not much of a story point other than I love trains. But also, Route 66 and trains go hand in hand. The train follows the mother road the entire way. As Lightning McQueen comes up to discover that this truck that he's been following is not Mac. Oh, by the way, the drawings of the little batteries on that truck were made by my sons. There's 4 sides to the truck, and I have 4 boys, and thank goodness it all worked out. We always had the vision of this little stop sign here with this lone street light. It was like an island of light in a sea of darkness because he doesn't have headlights. As he turns onto what he thinks is a road that will take him back to the interstate, we pan up to see this old Route 66 sign. The next shot of McQueen driving on this curvy road is the first time that you see a curvy road in the movie.
Not in my town, you don't.
The entire interstate, everything that he traveled, is a straight line.
Oh, no.
The film, up to this point, was really set up to be as frantic and as fast-paced as we possibly can. The staging, the cutting, the movement, always keeping the camera moving. And all that was there to set up the modern world, how fast-paced it is. And it's all there to set up this moment. When we go to that blinking yellow light, and you hear that lonely Hank Williams song playing, and you see these shots of Radiator Springs. If you notice, most of these shots are locked down cameras. And we stay an extra long time on almost every one of these shots. Because we wanted to tell the story that this town, the one commodity that this town has of Radiator Springs is time. They have lots of time. And this opening sequence really, we hope to establish that, of how different this place is than any place we've seen in the modern world. Having Fillmore and Sarge looking at the blinking light came from an experience we had in Eric, Oklahoma, where one of the guys there who actually started a lawnmower racing track, and I asked him why he started this track. He said, well, before this, we just sat down at the intersection and watched the light change. And I never forgot that the entertainment in this town that we found on Route 66 was just watching the light change. As Lightning McQueen came into the town of Radiator Springs, we had all these different ways that we were going to have him wreck the town. But in the end, we wanted him to be forced to slow down, visually, physically forced to slow down. So we thought being strapped to a road paving machine, because by nature, road paving goes really slow. Therefore, to have to be put to a road paving machine means that he would have to then wreck the road. Then we got the idea to have him get caught up in some barbed wire, the devil's rope, which is such a part of Route 66, and to get wrapped around the statue of the founder, Stanley, and then drag him like a water skier through the town and ripping up the road. Even the log that's right in front of Stanley looks like the tow rope of a water ski. And as Stanley starts being dragged through the town, he starts cutting and do beautiful cuts. And even the way the gravel kicks up is like water skiing. We have this ramp set up that's like a jump because we had to get Stanley cut up into the wires overhead. And we thought, well, how's it going to do that? Well, there's a water skiing jump. And it turns into a gigantic slingshot. Then, of course, Stanley lands right on his perch because it's animation, and we can do that. To show how absolutely isolated Radiator Springs is, we wanted to show what a big deal Lightning McQueen was and what gigantic news it is that he's missing. And even to the point of having Jay Leno, or as we call him, Jay Limo, have him in his monologue.
What's harder to find? Lightning McQueen or crew chief who'll work with him?
Jay Leno, of course, is a huge car collector and a huge car guy. And of course, we wanted to have drive-on parts, as I say, instead of walk-on parts, of all these people that are big car nuts. The sequence where Lightning McQueen is in the impound, it's like the car equivalent of a jail, is where we establish the character Mater. Mater is inspired by two things. One is the real Mater, the self-appointed mayor of Redneck Hill and the infill of Lowe's Motor Speedway in Charlotte, North Carolina. When I first met Mater, he introduced himself as Mater, and I went, Mater? He goes,
Yeah, like Mater, but without the tuh.
And I always loved that introduction, and that we had to have it in the film. The type of vehicle Mater is, the tow truck, is inspired by this rusty tow truck that Joe Ranft and I saw on our Route 66 research trip in Galena, Kansas. And Joe always loved the idea of having a tow truck, because by nature, a tow truck helps others. And he loved that idea for Mater, that he always wants to help others. But from a story standpoint, Mater is a really important character in the film because it establishes something that Lightning McQueen does not have in his life, a true friend. Joe Ranft always said that Mater is like a dog, a trusty dog, that it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what mood you're in, doesn't matter how famous you are, you're my friend through thick and thin, and I'm there for you. The traffic court sequence is the place where we establish the other two main characters of Radiator Springs. That's Doc Hudson and Sally, the Porsche. We wanted to have Doc Hudson's introduction to be something that just shocks you and just like to sort of come out of nowhere and set him up to be this strong character.
May Doc have mercy on your soul.
The character of Doc Hudson was really inspired by the history of the Hudson Hornet.
I'm going to put him in jail till he rots.
I didn't know much about Hudson Hornets when we started, but as we were doing research, I kept hearing about this car that was this legendary car. And when I first looked at it, I thought, well, this seems like a grandpa car. What's so big about this? And then you find out this car was the fastest production car of its day. It dominated NASCAR racing back in the days when they were true stock cars. It was the first unibody car ever made. It was so far ahead of its time. And you sit there and hear all this amazing stories and go, yeah, but it looks like a grandpa car. And I thought, perfect. That's exactly what I want Lightning McQueen to judge him on. He just assumes that this guy is just this grandpa car. And then you find out, of course, later that he's this ex-champion racer. Doc Hudson's racing history matches that of the Hudson Hornets history. The whole choice of Sally being a Porsche really came from the idea that we wanted to have a character that Lightning McQueen would look at and go, obviously, you're a modern car. You don't belong here with all these old cars. And I can relate to you. And he immediately starts picking her up because she's a beautiful Porsche. We picked a Porsche because we just thought the Porsche 911 is one of the most beautiful cars ever done, and the Porsche company was so great to work with. Sally's character was inspired tremendously from a woman that we met on Route 66 named Dawn Welsh. She runs the Rock Cafe in Stroud, Oklahoma. She's actually, a young woman who has a wonderful young family, and she moved to Route 66 from life in the big city, life in the fast lane. She wanted a simpler life. And we were very inspired by that. In fact, she bought her little cafe not even knowing it was on Route 66 until these Swiss doctors on Harleys were pulling up one day. And she said, why are you here? And you go, well, you're on Route 66. So we were inspired by that aspect of the Mother Road, of these people that were trying to find a simpler life, getting out of the fast lane. And we thought this would be perfect for this character of Sally, which Bonnie Hunt does a great job in doing the voice for. But in the traffic court where you first meet her, we wanted the audience and we wanted McQueen to really assume that she's not from here. He assumes naturally that she's from Los Angeles, from his lawyer's office, because the majority of Porsches made in the world are sold in the United States. The majority of Porsches sold in the United States are sold in California. And the majority of Porsches sold in California are sold in Los Angeles. And so naturally, Sally, the Porsche, would be from Los Angeles. Life in the fast lane. In finding the right voice for Doc Hudson, there's really one choice for us from the beginning, and that was Paul Newman. Paul Newman, not only being a great actor, he is an amazing race car driver. And his real passion these days is race car driving. And Paul really helped us out in making it authentic. He became one of my most important racing consultants. I kind of collect terrible jobs when I see them. Because if ever I'm having not such a great day, I always think of those times.
We're going to hit you up to Sweet Bessie, and you're going to pull her nice.
You gotta be kidding me.
The worst job of all, we were driving through Las Vegas, me and my wife once, in the middle of summer. The thermometer in our minivan said it was 126 degrees out. I looked over, and there was these guys putting on a new roof with hot tar in 126-degree weather. And I thought, there it is. That's it, right there. If you're listening to this and you work in Las Vegas and you do roofs, I'm sure you have great benefits and you do a great job. But I looked at that, and I thought, that's a tough job. And so as we were developing what we could do to Lightning McQueen to make it to be the worst job possible, I kept thinking of those those guys in Las Vegas. And I thought, let's put them to work in the hot, hot sun with hot tar, pulling this heavy machine. And we worked so hard to make Bessie filthy. We love the name Bessie because it's just so friendly and nice. And then when you see her, she is just dripping. We purposely made her just dripping with tar. Bob Pauly, Tia Cratter, Bill Cohn, production design team, I just kept asking them, make her dirtier, make her more filthy. And we studied, those tar pots that roofers use. We studied road paving machines. We took tons of pictures to make her as just smelly. You know how you're driving on the road and you're following one of those roofers who have those tar pots and that smell comes into your car? Well, that's what I wanted it to feel like for Lightning McQueen. We even made the smoke even go a little blue because somehow it just looked like it would smell like tar that much more if it was a little bit of blue in it. But the whole point of it was, here is this prima donna, and we wanted him to have to do manual labor to fix what he broke. It's simple, right? Responsibility. You broke it, you fix it, you can go. As simple as that. And he's such a prima donna. I shouldn't be doing this. In the story right now, we wanted to really establish that Lightning McQueen is in his own living hell. And everything supports that. Having this crazy, rusty truck sitting next to him where he's trapped just working, and this guy's incessantly talking about nothing. This stinky road paving machine behind him. And even the hot, hot sun. The art direction was very important at this point, and the coloring of the whole town. At this point in time, we wanted it to be really hot and almost bleached out. There's hardly any color in the world. We wanted to really say, why would anybody live here? As Lightning McQueen starts liking the characters and liking the town a little bit more, you'll notice that the color actually starts getting a little brighter. The sky gets a little less hazy. And when he really falls in love with a town, every single scene is like a picture postcard. It's all there to help reinforce Lightning McQueen's growth and his change. It was important to establish that this town was really, really isolated. They are so far off of the interstate that no one ever comes to this town. And we felt the best way to show how desperate they are to wanting customers is to actually have a couple of customers by mistake come into town. So we had this minivan couple. The husband's named Van and the wife's named Minnie. And by the way, the colors of the cars, our minivan is green and our best friend Marcy Smothers' minivan was purple. That's why the colors are like that. So we wanted this minivan couple to come into town. And of course, it's a classic thing that the guys don't want to ask for direction and the wives always want to ask for direction. And the guy's completely lost. It also established each of the characters in town and what they do and what they sell. Voices of the minivan couple were Edie McClurg as Minnie, the wife, and Richard Kind as Van, the husband. They are both brilliant improv actors. We really didn't have much of a script for what the minivan couple was going to say and how they would react to each of the townspeople. So we brought them in. We recorded them down at Disney with Doc Kane, and we had them in isolation booths. And Joe Ranft and I were on the outside of these booths looking at them, and we would hold up things and sort of show them what we were trying to sell them and just let them improv and riff. and always with the idea, he said, you're just trying to get back to the interstate. And it was so funny because we had, Richard Kind was kind of always bothered, and Edie McClurg was always so pleasant and so nice. Of course, until Ramon raises up and shows him the Von Dutch pinstriping. It was really inspiring to see how Edie and Richard improv'd and created these great characters. In the Victory Lane sequence, we established McQueen's dream. And here, where he is stuck, he's trapped, we went back to a radio to remind the audience of his desire. We did it by using his own dream that he had earlier in the film to this is where his life he wanted to be, except now Chick Hicks, his arch rival, has taken his dream. And so we just redid his dream, replacing Lightning in it with Chick Hicks. Michael Keaton did the most amazing voice for Chick Hicks. And he came in here and he was so hilarious and adding to it. And he pushed that character far beyond what we thought it ever could be. So after he has this vision that Chick is taking his dream, now it clearly shows how little McQueen cares about this town and, frankly, how little McQueen cares about anything. By just, Doc said you got to, take care and do a good job of doing this road. But instead, McQueen just does the worst job. He doesn't care about the job he did. And it sets up what we all think is one of the funniest shots in the movie, Mater loving driving on the new road. It really is a metaphor for the whole film, that in order to do a good job, you should take your time and take it slow. In this case, he didn't want to slow down. He wanted to get out of there really fast, and it caused him to do such a bad job, he had to start all over again. As we were thinking of a world where cars were alive and there were no humans, we started thinking about how everything in nature could be kind of in the shape of cars as well. Bill Cohn, the production designer, came with this fantastic idea. His reasoning was, as humans, we look up into clouds and we look up into mountains and we see human faces. In a world where cars are alive, cars would look up into mountains and clouds and see car parts. And so he came up with this great idea that instead of Radiator Springs being the gateway to Monument Valley, it's the gateway to Ornament Valley. And the idea that it's all these hood ornaments you see in the rock sculptures and the car parts. We were inspired by the Cadillac Ranch on Route 66 in Amarillo, Texas, to do the big mountain range that we call the Cadillac Range. And the road goes up over Tail Fin Pass. And so this really opened up our kind of thinking about what this world that is inhabited by nothing but cars, what the natural world could be like. We started looking at where on the car paint would be a red rock and the chrome would all be kind of the silver rock. We also looked up in the sky and saw that jet trails could be in the shape of tire treads. There's really not much of a story point to that, but it's just we had 4 years to make this movie and we get carried away at times. We have fun with it. And so we have car shapes and car parts in not only the sky in the clouds, in the rocks, in the cactus, but even the flowers you see in Radiator Springs are in the shape of 50s taillights. It was really fun creating the world of the cars inhabit. In this scene, where you see the cactus, when McQueen kind of gets stuck in the cactus, look closely, you'll actually see the prickly pear part of the cactus. You look closely, you'll actually see a little car in that. Everything in this story really revolves around Lightning McQueen's storyline in his story arc. However, there's a lot of interwoven story arcs. One of them is the town itself, all the characters, and the fact that back when Route 66 was vital and the only way to get across the country, people would come through the town, and all the townspeople loved to take care of the customer. They lived for that. And since they were bypassed by the interstate, they don't have any customers anymore. Lightning McQueen comes into town, and they all are kind of excited that he's there, and they start to try to encourage him to come visit their shop to be the customer that they've longed for. Later, you'll see when McQueen really has fallen in love with the town, he becomes the customer that they have been waiting for.
I'll show them. I will show them. Oh, rage! I hate it! Hate.
Music, sweet music.
In this scene where Lightning McQueen has worked all night to repave part of the road, he was dedicated to trying to do a good job to show Doc that he could actually do a good job. The feeling that we really wanted to get was like that feeling that you have when the snow has fallen for the very first time in a winter. And you get so excited as a kid, and you just want to kind of get your snow clothes on, get your sled, and drop everything that you were going to do and just go out and go sledding. So we thought as the townspeople woke up and they look at this brand new paved road, that all they want to do is just drive on it. Ramon gets lower than he ever has for the first time in a long time. And everybody's just having a good time. And that even drove the way that we rendered the asphalt. If you look closely, you'll see an actual reflection in the asphalt, because we want it to be so smooth feeling. And it's a really important stage in McQueen starting to do things nice for the town. He's doing it to prove a point, because Doc says, you drive like you fix roads lousy. And that challenges McQueen. He says, well, I'm going to prove that I can drive well by fixing this road well. And that's what kind of drives him. Katherine Hellman, famous for her role on Soap and Who's the Boss, she does a fantastic job of the voice of Lizzie, the Model T. Lizzie needed to be somewhat forgetful in a senior sort of way, but still have a lot of heart. As Doc comes out looking for McQueen, he immediately assumes that the young punk is trying to make a run for it. He finds, though, to his surprise, that as McQueen got done with his road, he just wanted to come out and try to practice this one turn. And he's dedicated to trying to make this turn right. And it surprises him. You know, it's the first time that Doc has kind of warmed up towards McQueen. And it's an important story point here. We kind of tip our hand slightly to the knowledge of Doc in racing. Owen Wilson does the voice of Lightning McQueen. Owen was remarkable at making the part his own by ad-libbing. I told Owen once, I said, you know how every boy is born with his own set of sound effects. You know, we all grow up knowing how to, fire a machine gun, throw a hand grenade, and all that kind of stuff. I turned to Owen. I said, Owen, I had the tape rolling at the time. I said, what was your sound effect for lightning and thunder? And he started going, chow, chow, ching, chow, chow. And we did this long run of his sound effects for what lightning sounds like. And I was laughing so hard I almost ruined the take. And from that session, we actually were inspired by creating Lightning McQueen's catchphrase, ka-chow. And we carried it through the entire movie, and it came from Owen Wilson's ad-lib. All the voice actors we used in Cars were phenomenal to work with. And one of the things we always look for is actors who can make the part their own. They have a kind of an ad-libbing ability. And it's important because in making an animated feature film, which takes about 4 years to make, spontaneity is not part of the process. And I always look for the place in the production where we can be spontaneous. And with the actors, that's definitely one place. Because you want it just to sound natural. That's what we always listen for when we're working with the actors. Something that just sounds natural, like a character is just being real. Two of the actors that we worked with were unbelievable in ad-libbing and making the part their own. One of those actors is Tony Shalhoub. He played the part of Luigi. There's a scene here where Luigi is trying to get McQueen to come by his shop to buy some tires, to be the customer they've always longed for.
You come to my shop. Luigi take a good care of you, even though you're not a Ferrari.
And it was so much fun because we just kind of wrote a few lines for Tony, and we just let Tony go. And Joe Ranft always said that in these sessions with Tony Shalhoub, he acted from the tip of his toes all the way to the top of his head. You can't believe how much energy Tony put into every single line that he did as Luigi. It was hilarious. And especially this scene where he is trying to convince McQueen he's trying to make a deal with McQueen of what he's going to offer him as far as his tires. And it was absolutely hilarious. Of course, another actor that we've worked with now 3 times that is probably one of the best ad-lib actors or actresses that I've ever seen is Bonnie Hunt. And Bonnie Hunt does the voice of Sally. And it was so fun working with her because she just feeds off of things that you tell her and lines that you say to her. And it is so fun in this scene where she is being nice to McQueen for the first time, inviting him to stay at the Cozy Cone. Just the fact that we told her, now you need to be inviting him, but you kind of starting to like him, but you, of course, don't want him to know that you like him. And that's all we had to say. And we had kind of one line written, and she took off on it and just added. So all this acting that she does in this scene is pure Bonnie. And it's just amazing. It brings the character to life like you cannot script. And one of the animators came up with the idea that Sally has a hidden pinstriping tattoo. When the idea was first suggested, we thought it was hilarious. It made us laugh. And I never forget when we added it to the story reel for the first time, and we screened it to a small part of our crew. There was one woman who saw it and laughed for about 5 minutes straight, really hard. And it was a little longer than everybody else laughed, and she just kept laughing. And then it was like, did we hit home? Did we kind of hit home here? You know. We had a screening of the story reel of Cars, and I remember Andrew Stanton giving us a note. Okay, you've established the town of Radiator Springs, but what do they do for fun? Dan Scanlon suggested that Mater could just say, well, how about we go tractor tipping? And it's one of those things that as soon as Dan said that, I got it. And it was fantastic. It was so funny. And so in the world where these vehicles actually have intelligence, we thought, well, tractors would actually be kind of the animals. But initially, we started talking about how Mater could actually push a tractor over. And I thought, no. Have it to where he goes up and he honks in front of him and causes the tractor to be startled. And tractors have these gigantic back wheels. And these big wheels would make him pop a wheelie and he'd just go over backwards. What's great about having Mater use his horn, it is something that McQueen does not have. Mater can do something that McQueen can't, honk a horn. And so it became just one more little notch eating away at McQueen's ego, that here's this rusty tow truck and he can actually do something I can't, honk a horn. In thinking about cow tipping, we started looking at the heads of real cows and saw that there was a parallel to the way that tractors actually looked between the shape of a cow's head and a tractor. We thought if we could get that parallel, it might be kind of fun. Frank the Combine, we always thought was kind of this wild bull that was off in the field that you don't want to tangle with. So we animated McQueen running away from Frank the Combine. It was a story point also that Mater can drive through this rutted field very fast and very easily. But McQueen, this 700-something horsepower race car, having a really hard time because his suspension is so tight and he's so low to the ground that he's having a very hard time getting away from Frank. And Mater can get away from him really easily. Again, it's showing McQueen out of his element, and he's maybe not as great at everything as he thinks he is. The first scene that we put into production typically is kind of a standalone, self-contained scene. What I mean by that is the rest of the story can change, and the scene would stay the same. And tractor tipping was the perfect example of that, because it's just a wonderful, funny thing that Mater does with McQueen to pass the time. A long time ago, I bought Joe Ranft a set of these Billy Bob teeth, and he used to wear them at actually the most inappropriate times, which made it really, really funny. And he became this different character. And I tell you, Mater is Joe Ranft. He started taking on an accent and so on. And so as we were developing the character of Mater, I would have him do the scratch vocals with the teeth in because he just became this character. But Joe also had such a huge heart. And it was very hard to kind of find some actor, some voice that could do as good of a job as Joe. And then we found Larry the Cable Guy, for the greatest living American actor today. He's so funny, and he brought so much to the character, along with Joe's big heart. And I think it's really a combination of those two guys that made this character Mater so special. And then with Bob Pauly's brilliant character design. But Bob Pauly's character design is really based on the storyboards Joe did. And one of the things that was amazing about Joe is when he would start on a film, there would be one thing that would get him excited. Then he would take and storyboard that little sequence. And those sequences that Joe first storyboarded would make it all the way through the production. When everything else around it would be changing, these little sequences Joe would do would never change. In Toy Story, it was the army man in A Bug's Life. It was when the circus bugs actually found out they were supposed to be warriors. And in Cars, it was Mater. Joe just fell in love with his character. And he thought, this guy, everybody passes off as the dumbest character there is. He actually can do something incredibly well. And with tow trucks, Joe always thought, well, they have to back up all the time. So why not he becomes the world's best backwards driver? And that came right out of Joe. At one point, we realized that the Sally character was not really coming off the screen like we wanted it to. It was just kind of flat, but it was a very important character for us. We wanted to have a strong female character. We thought, well, Bonnie Hunt is a great writer, and her writing partner, Don Lake, came up to Pixar. We showed him the movie, and we asked them to help with the Sally character. And so they went away, and they actually came up with a lot of great ideas for different scenes with the Sally character. In fact, after this best friends moment, they actually came up with a little sub-scene where Sally drives over to McQueen's Cozy Cone and talks to him. And it wasn't in the movie originally. It was something that Bonnie and Don came up with. And we loved it because it really kind of helped the relationship between Sally and McQueen. Because Sally heard the conversation and him promising this helicopter ride. She knows Mater. She knows how important this is to him. She also knows this prima donna really didn't mean it. And she just wanted to kind of mention it to him. And so it was a very simple scene. But I just love the acting in it. So after it was written, we got Bonnie Hunt and Owen Wilson together, and it's one of the scenes they actually performed together in our recording studio. And they fed off of each other, and the emotion was really true, and it was very nice. It turned out to be a great scene. There's one more thing I love about it is that about this time, I was getting caught up in these characters as just being characters, kind of forgetting that they were cars. And so when Sally backs away from Lightning McQueen, we thought, let's put the brake lights and the reverse lights on Sally. And it's this wonderful little moment where you feel like, oh yeah, they're cars. I completely forgot they're cars. And so it says, when these little reminders every now and then, you go, oh yeah, don't forget these are cars. Sarge and Fillmore, this hippie Volkswagen van, living right next door to this World War II veteran, and they're constantly arguing, but they're never apart. They're like best friends. We came up with this idea of having Sarge start every morning with Reveille, and of course Fillmore has to ruin it by playing Jimi Hendrix. This happens every single morning in Radiator Springs. We constantly wanted to remind the audience that McQueen has to get to this race. And we did it in flash forwards. And we kind of changed it slightly in this dream sequence where this experience he just had going tractor tipping and Frank got merged with his life of winning the Piston Cup. We're always looking for ways to parallel the car world and the human world. So when McQueen bursts into Doc's office and sees the sheriff getting a smog check, it is something that we kind of wanted McQueen, an image he never wanted to see in his life. Throughout the opening race, the image of the Piston Cup was shown all over the place. And it was very, very important to show that image a lot so that the audience could get used to what the Piston Cup looks like for this sequence in which McQueen discovers Doc's old, tarnished Piston Cups. Because you wanted the audience to see that silhouette and get it right away. So we went back to the opening race and we added a lot more scenes and images of the Piston Cup all over the place. And while you're watching the opening race, you don't even think about it, but it's all there to set up this scene. We just love the idea of this guy having these piston cups that McQueen cherishes and wants so badly, and he treats them terribly. They're tarnished, he has tools in them, and he even says they're just a bunch of empty cups, and he doesn't care about them. It's such a wonderful surprise for the main character, and I think for the audience too. All of a sudden you realize there's another level to this Doc Hudson character than you realized. And the fact that he's hiding it from his friends in the town. It's something he doesn't want them to know. And you wonder why. And it just sort of piques your interest. Oftentimes in our films, we are in a sequence and we realize it's really important for the audience to get a certain moment in our films. And we realize in order for them to really get it, we have to go back in the movie, earlier in the film, and set it up properly. But you don't want the setups ever to feel like a setup. So you want to kind of think about what the setup's going to be and make it really entertaining unto itself. And so no one suspects it. But that's what I mean by every single thing in our films, and especially in this film, Cars, is there for a reason, a story reason. Even though, as you're watching it, it's really entertaining. You don't realize that it's actually setting you up for something that you'll understand later. As Joe and I were just starting to develop Cars, I took the summer off to be with my family. We bought a used motorhome. We had 2 months. And on this journey, there was so much inspiration that happened for this film. Especially this one day, we were in North Carolina, and we drove on the Blue Ridge Parkway, 600 and something miles. And you go only 35 miles an hour on this windy road. It was the most beautiful drive I've ever taken, and I love driving. And I remember driving this road and realizing this is what this movie, Cars, should be about. This road, the Blue Ridge Parkway, was about just the journey. It's not about getting to a destination. It's about just taking the drive and enjoying the beauty of the drive. And it was so breathtakingly beautiful. Every single turn you would take, there would be a waterfall. You turn around at one corner, and there's this grand vista across a whole mountain range. And turn another corner, there's this gorgeous tunnel of trees with a light coming through. And my wife was shocked when she looked up, and I'm driving this motorhome with my entire family in it, towing our 1962 Ford Falcon, and I'm videotaping the whole time. Because I said, I got to remember this, honey. I got to remember this. I got to put this in the film. And I thought this would be perfect for the movie to have a race car who is built from the ground up to go as fast as possible. The whole idea of a race is to get to that finish line faster than anybody else, to just slow down and take a drive like I was experiencing on the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was a very important sequence for me, and I knew that I wanted it to be really beautiful. And oftentimes people were wondering, oh, should we cut this sequence out? And I was like, no, this is like the point of the film, that the guy starts. And we even have a line where McQueen says, so where are we going? And Sally goes, I don't know. And that's the point. It's like you get on this journey, and the goal was the art direction, the layout, the animation, everything was about, let's make this road so beautiful and so much fun that every single person in the audience wants to just drive that road. The Wheelwell Motel was inspired by this town that we explored on Route 66. It was called Glen Rio. It's right on the border of Texas and New Mexico. And this town, more than any other, represented these towns dying because of the interstate, as Michael Wallace called it, death by interstate. It's a modern-day ghost town that was a vibrant place, a little vibrant community. You could tell. And we wandered through this cafe and this motel there. And it truly was a ghost town. And we thought, we've got to show McQueen a place like Glen Rio that Radiator Springs will become if nothing happens. This sequence at the Wheelwell Motel was basically just dialogue. It's a talking head sequence, as we call it. We laid it out originally to where Lightning McQueen and Sally are just sitting in front of the Wheelwell talking. And we even started animating that. And then we looked at it and said, they're just sitting there. And so I remembered back to our Route 66 journey in exploring Glen Rio and how we would walk through. And I said, that's what you would do. That's what the characters would do. They would kind of walk through, drive through, and kind of, as they're talking, just sort of move through the ruins of the Wheelwell. And so we completely relaid out the sequence. And the animators had to reanimate a few shots, but it really made it much more special in having them explore the motel. All along our journey on Route 66, we heard the stories of what it was like to be in these towns when the interstate came. We were always very touched by these stories, and we knew we wanted to get this in our film. It was a kind of a complex idea, and we were really pondering, how are we going to tell this in the story? So we thought one way that we could do it would be maybe have Randy Newman write a song, and then we could go back in time and see what it was like in the town. It was really important for us to show what the town looked like in its heyday. As we modeled the town, we made sure that we had the old decrepit version of each building, but we also created a brand new version of each building. We studied the way that old home movies faded and created this sequence so it really looked like something was shot back in the 50s with a color negative film. But the thing that inspired us the most was Randy Newman's song and James Taylor's amazing performance. We originally storyboarded the sequence and we had kind of the same image over and over again of just before and after. But Randy touched on part of the story that we heard on Route 66, whereas the town didn't know what was coming with the interstate. They thought it was a good thing. This interstate is going to bring more people to our town. No one predicted what would happen, that people would drive on the interstate and just bypass the town. And Randy captured that in his lyrics. And I was kind of blown away by that. And I remember when I first got his demo of the song, and I drove home and I listened to it in my car probably about 20 times in a row. And I came back to Joe and I said, Joe, we got to re-storyboard this sequence because we need to show that part of the story, that they were excited about the interstate coming, that they couldn't wait for it to come. And the last thing in the world they expected was that, in fact, no one would come anymore. And it just ripped their heart out and changed their town forever. As we storyboarded this part of the film, we had the drive with Sally, we had the flashback of the town, we had Doc's story, all these heavy scenes one after another. And we realized that we didn't have much humor in this part of the scene. It kind of got heavy. And we actually lost track of Mater. We realized we had a really fun character with Mater. And so we thought we really needed to lighten up this moment in the film. And so this sequence of the tractor stampede coming into town was one of the very last sequences that we added to the film.
Man, the paint's still wet.
We always had this idea that as they leave the tractor tipping scene, they kind of go through a gap in the fence. So we went back and actually added a board that they knock off. So it feels like they created an opening in the fence for the tractors to escape. It's also something very reminiscent of a town on Route 66, Oatman, Arizona, where they have these burros and mules just roaming the town. They're just there in the town all the time. And we thought, well, that's actually very, very much like Route 66 to have these tractors just kind of roaming around in the town. It was a great device to get McQueen out of the town, to go out to actually sneak up and discover Doc has put on his old racing tires. He's gone out to this little track. And he's sitting there at this start-finish line that they had set up earlier in the film. And it says right away that here's this guy, and it's like a famous old basketball player putting on his old high tops, and he's standing at a free throw line. That's what we always thought. And it's like something McQueen's always heard about, but he's never seen, as to how amazing this guy was. Bill Cohn did the most beautiful pastels to establish the lighting for this sequence. And they were breathtaking. They're some of our favorite pastels that he did for the whole movie. This amazing golden hour of sunlight coming in with the purple shadows, but how this sunlight would illuminate the dust being kicked up by Doc was so stunningly beautiful that we knew this would be very, very special. As Doc approaches the turn, it was really important to show how much faster he's driving towards that turn than Lightning McQueen ever did. You want to feel like, oh, this guy is going to wreck. But then it's like a graceful ice skater. Once he starts going into that turn, it is like stunningly beautiful how he can get his rear end out, turning into the turn, turning right to go left. And he sits there, drives it with the throttle. And it's just... It just turned out to be breathtaking. As Doc goes into his back room, followed by McQueen, this sequence was very important from a story standpoint to show how Doc was so deeply hurt by something that happened in his racing career that he would turn his back on this whole racing world for the rest of his life. And what he doesn't realize is he turned his back on his true passion. We worked with Paul Newman on this sequence 2 or 3 times, and I always loved talking with him about this sequence. And it was Paul that added this wonderful line, "There was a lot left in me. I never got a chance to show him." And I remember when he did that line, it really took my breath away because it felt so real. And this hurt was so deep, and it just really, really made that scene come alive. The acting that the animators did in this was so special. We always videotape our actors while we're doing the recording sessions, and they really studied Paul and what he did. And his acting is so beautiful because it's so minimal and so pure. And the animators animated Doc Hudson with such a wonderful economy to where it just felt so real and so true and so much like Paul Newman. For years, we had a sequence where you actually saw McQueen finish the road. And all the townspeople kind of get there and help him finish the road. It was always intended to show how he didn't want help before. He always worked alone, and that he finally accepted help from the town to finish the road. And it worked, but for some reason, it just kind of felt like it always took a long time to get through. And it was like, it just wasn't quite working. We tried to fix it about 4 or 5 different ways. Finally, we were sitting in editorial, and I remember turning to Joe and said, why don't we just cut it out? The characters would wake up, and he finished the road. And then everybody just assumed, because he was allowed to go once he finished the road, that he was then gone. And it set up this wonderful sense that how much that all the townspeople, including the sheriff, actually missed McQueen, thinking that he was gone. And also it set up one of my favorite scenes in the film, which is where Mater, thinking that McQueen has gone, is explaining to McQueen why everyone is so sad. We realized the more time we added of Mater just staring at McQueen, the funnier it got. And we kept adding more time, and it got funnier. And it was hilarious in dailies. We just kept adding the time until we said, okay, that's enough. And it's one of the funniest scenes in the film. So McQueen finally becomes the customer that everyone in town has always been waiting for. And it's kind of the culmination of the relationship arc between McQueen and all the townsfolk.
I'm not sure these tires can get me all the way to California.
Pete, stop.
Yeah, does anybody know what time Luigi's opens?
I can't believe it.
And of course, we started with Luigi and him getting tires because Luigi was the one that was always trying to get McQueen to come by. It was also a wonderful opportunity to finally go into Luigi's shop, to see that this tire store is like a men's shoe store. You see those gorgeous Ferrari posters all over the wall that Bob Pauly designed based on historic racing posters. And, of course, sets up this phenomenal vocal performance by Tony Shalhoub about selling him white wall tires. We decided to use this classic version of Get Your Kicks on Route 66 by Chuck Berry. Now, this is not the one that we kept hearing on all of his greatest hits album and stuff. This was a rare second recording, a rare B-side that Hoon Kim, our manager of our editorial department, found for us. And it had such energy to it that we wanted to use it. And we went to the record company to get the master tape of this version of Route 66 by Chuck Berry. And the record company didn't even know it existed. They kept saying, no, it doesn't exist. We go, it does exist. We have it. And so they dug through their vaults and their archives, and they actually found it. They found something that they didn't even know they had. The new customer sequence culminates, of course, with McQueen getting a new paint job by Ramon. And Bob Pauly designed this paint job, and it was so beautiful with this beautiful cove painting. What's interesting is when we were looking at this in a shader review, a rendering came up where it was kind of a mistake without his spoiler. We originally intended for McQueen to have his spoiler on during this. He looked so gorgeous without his spoiler. He looked more like an old car. We thought, let's take off his spoiler. And so then we went through and took off all the little bits, of him that the race cars kind of add on there for aerodynamics. And with this beautiful classic paint job and these fantastic white wall tires with the moon hubcaps, he just looked fantastic. On our journey on Route 66, there was something that I saw that I thought really became the visual metaphor for these old towns, and that is the neon light. During the day, neon signs have faded paint. They're kind of rusty. They clearly look like they're very, very old. But at night, when the neon comes on, neon doesn't fade. And that glorious, saturated color of the neon light shining down on these beautiful cars, it's as like you've gone back in time. And I thought, this is fantastic. I want this in the film. This could be a special sequence where the town actually gets their pride back. And we wanted to have Lightning McQueen be a part of this. We actually went through the second act and made sure that you didn't see any neon signs with the exception of Sally's. Being the newcomer in town, she fixed up her motel and got her neon sign working. And so we kind of withheld the rest of the neon because we saved it for this special moment. We wanted to have a special moment for when McQueen really, truly had fallen in love with the town, with Sally, and he wanted to be here. After he got painted and with the white wall tires and everything, he looks like he belongs in this town. And when these neon signs come on, it's like we go back in time to seeing the town in its heyday, which is what Sally has always wanted to see. So it's like a gift for Sally to show his love for her, but also the town itself with this brand new asphalt road with its reflecting these gorgeous neon signs and seeing the gorgeous color of this neon and this fantastic song, Shaboom, playing to where it takes you back into time. And it was such a special moment. And that sets up when his former life, the racing world, comes into town. Again, things that we did in the first act, in that Victory Lane sequence, about how McQueen performs for the press corps and the cameraman and so on, was always just a setup for when the press corps comes back into town and ruins this special moment of where they're cruising in the neon. And they're trying to get him to perform for the camera like he always did before. And it was all there to show how McQueen has changed, how his former life wasn't exactly what McQueen always thought it was. It's shallow, it's hollow. And what he has now is actually very special and very deep. It's family and friends in this wonderful place in Radiator Springs. And so by having the press corps come in, we wanted them to be assaultive almost. The lights are harsh. The flashes are going off. They're screaming at him. And they're really not doing anything different than they did before. But because McQueen has changed and because the audience has been away from it for a while, being in Radiator Springs and kind of slowly falling in love with the town, it really felt assaultive. There's always one sequence in our movies that we just can't get right. We do it again and again and again and again and again. And we're like, it's driving us crazy. There's a scene here where McQueen is trying to say goodbye to Sally. He doesn't want to say goodbye. And we must have rewritten this scene 1,000 times because we just started thinking about putting ourselves in McQueen's point of view. He's in love, and he's so conflicted at this moment. There's tremendous pressure. He has to leave now, but he's in love with Sally, and he doesn't know what to say. We finally realized the secret was saying less. we realize that Sally loves him so much, she's going to make it easy on him, and she's going to back away and say, good luck. And right at the end, we added this line where it says, I hope you find what you're looking for. And it really just reinforced the emotion of this scene. As a press corps drives away, we needed to show that it was all Doc. And by having Sally witness Corey Vetta saying thanks for the call,
It's best for everyone.
it really set up this wonderful moment of just like Doc starting to feel guilty about what he's done. He thinks he's doing the right thing for the town because he just can't stand McQueen and racing cars are bad. But he never realized. He was caught up in his own struggles, internal struggles with his hatred of the racing world and therefore his hatred of McQueen and his mistrust of McQueen, that he was blind to the fact of how McQueen helped the town and gave them their pride back and helped them fix up the town. As McQueen leaves town and everyone slowly goes back to their places and turns off the neon, it sort of sets up something that we go back to the lighting that the town had when McQueen first came into town. But now it really seems desolate. And so we end the sequence, our time in Radiator Springs, with the same scene, the same shot that we did when we first entered Radiator Springs, and that is the blinking yellow light. There's a shot in which we enter the stadium through the archway. And if you look on the right, there's a little taxi cab. It's Vern's Taxi in Sonoma, California. Also, there is a shot where you see the commentators talking. In the background of that shot is the Pizza Planet truck. This is the only object that appears in every Pixar movie. And, of course, a shot of Emeryville, California, where Pixar is located. The stadium for the final race was so huge that our amazing crowds group had to fill the stands with 105,000 separately animated cars, including the little cars going up and down the rows. And there's 2,000 cars in the infield, and there was 13,000 cars entering the stadium at the very beginning. It is a remarkable achievement. It's the biggest crowd shots we've ever done. In the opening race, it's a night race, and it's a very small stadium that has very high stands, so you couldn't see out of the stadium. All of this was to set up that in the beginning of this movie, Lightning McQueen's entire world revolved around just the racing. When we decided to design this final race in the stadium, we on purpose made it a daytime race, and the stadium was much more wide open. And as you see in all the staging of the final race, you see a lot more of the sky and the outside world. This was to thematically represent visually that Lightning McQueen has changed and his world is about much more than just the racing world and what happens inside the stadium. At the beginning of every NASCAR race, there's a tradition to have a flyover of military jets. And we had to have that in there to really represent the beginning of a race of this magnitude. But also, it was kind of a gift to Bob Pauly, our production designer who designed all the characters. He is a plane fanatic as well as a car fanatic. So it gave him an opportunity to do a little biplane as well as the military jets. And we tried so hard in this movie to find a place to put a boat, because we had trains, helicopters, planes, blimps, cars, trucks, and we needed a boat. But, well, that'll come eventually. In the shots of the jet flyover, if you look closely, you will see an aerial view of Pixar Animation Studios. It was a satellite image we had of Pixar, and we just plugged it into the cityscape. One of the challenges to creating the final race was, how can we make a race with only 3 cars exciting? In the opening race, it was so exciting because there were so many cars on the track. NASCAR races have 43 cars, and it's so exciting to have these packs of cars passing the cameras. It makes for such an exciting event. The challenge of the final race was this race was just 3 cars. So how can we make this exciting as a race with 43 cars in it? What we did is we really divided the race into 2 parts. The first part is when McQueen is really not into the race. His mind is elsewhere. We show 3 different times his mind daydreaming.
Just me and the old man, fellas. He just doesn't have it today.
So in the staging of this first part of the race where he was struggling to keep up, we constantly kept the camera moving, and we were constantly showing that he was not himself.
Guys, you're here.
It's not until his friends from Radio Springs show up and become his pit crew that the old McQueen comes back. And at that point, the staging and the drama of the race really changes, because Lightning McQueen becomes himself again. In fact, he's better than he ever was. He's inspired. So the staging and the cutting really, really reflects that. There's a line that Doc Hudson says to the Radio Springs pit crew after Lightning McQueen realizes that his friends are there.
Hot snot, we are back in business.
That line is directly from Paul Newman, because I was talking to him on the phone one day and letting him know that I was going to come down and watch him race at Daytona for the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. He goes, hot snot, and it's such a classic Paul Newman line. And I had to as soon as he said it, I knew I had to get this into the movie. So when he came into the recording session and saw it written onto the script page, he actually started laughing about it. There's a shot inside the RSN director's trailer where you see the TV director directing the telecast of the final race. This is voiced by Artie Kempner, who is a good friend of ours who really helped us on this movie. He is the director for the Fox television broadcast of the NASCAR races, and he really helped us make the television broadcast feel authentic. So in the shots within the trailer are the most complex shots in the movie, because there are 44 separate monitors, each with a different image on it. So that means there was 44 different versions of this same shot at one time, and all composited together. And it was accurate. I actually worked with Artie, and he told me exactly which cameras in his trailer go to which monitor. So for all of you TV directors out there, that shot is accurate. The design of the Los Angeles International Speedway is actually inspired by 2 stadiums in the Los Angeles area. I grew up in Whittier, California, and I went to the Los Angeles Coliseum to see USC Trojans play all the time, because my dad was a big Trojans fan. And as a kid walking into the Coliseum, it is so impressive. And I've always liked that stadium because of the Olympic torch and the archways that are at one end. And I always thought that was a really dramatic, beautiful stadium built in the 30s. The other stadium that's kind of inspired by is the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, and which I had been to quite a bit. And in fact, in the beginning, you could see 2 cars leaning over the edge and kind of spitting off the edge of the top of the stadium. And that's something I used to do all the time at the Rose Bowl, because it was just so fun to to see that and to do that. So we thought about the design. What would a big oval racetrack look like if it was in Los Angeles? And imagine if it was built in the 30s. And so we took a look at the Los Angeles Coliseum and the Rose Bowl and kind of with a racetrack and kind of merged it all together. It's also kind of placed roughly where the Rose Bowl kind of is, because it's a very dramatic setting kind of in a little valley amongst all the mountains. One of the great character arcs in the film is Guido, the little Italian forklift. When Lightning McQueen first meets him, all he wants to do is give a real race car pit stop. At first, Lightning McQueen thinks, oh, this guy's just insane. But what's great is here in the final race, we get to see Guido do a real pit stop. It's great because of how clever he is and how quickly he can change 4 tires. It's a fantastic job by Randy Newman on the score during the end of the final race here.
This is it. We're heading into the final lap, and McQueen is right behind the leaders. What a comeback!
Listen, it all comes down to this.
This is it.
Here in the last lap, when Lightning McQueen goes out of control and slides into the infield, we wanted it to be a direct copy of when he watched Doc Hudson do the turn in the dirt. And so if you compare the two scenes, shot for shot, they are pretty much identical. And in fact, we added similar dust effects from the Doc Hudson turn. As we come out of the final lap, and Lightning McQueen looks like he's going to win, Chick Hicks is so frustrated because, again, he's going to finish behind the King, which he's done his entire career. And he's so frustrated that he purposely wrecks the King.
Not coming in behind you again, old man.
Now, we wanted this wreck to be dramatic. So we actually studied one of the most amazing wrecks I'd ever seen. It's in Talladega, 1993, when Dale Earnhardt Sr. bumped Rusty Wallace, and he flew across the infield, and he spun 23 times. Every time I see that wreck, it takes my breath away, and that's what we wanted the feeling for the audience to have when the King wrecked. And so that's why we emulated that wreck.
All right, Daddy. Yeah.
When Lightning McQueen stops, gives up the win in order to go back and push the King across the finish line, we were so excited about this ending because it really shows how Lightning McQueen came full circle.
What are you doing, kid?
I think the King should finish his last race.
We're very proud of this ending. We had Richard Petty, who does the voice of the King, come into a recording session. He had busted ribs once in his career. I asked him to remember what it was like to have busted ribs and think about that as he performed the King's lines there after the wreck. And he was watching this scene, and just a matter of factly, he said, you know, it's illegal to push a car on the last lap of a race. Boom, 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 boom. I tell you, that's one of those moments where you go, you're kidding. He goes, no, it's illegal. You can't do it. And I was like, I wanted so badly for this to be authentic. So that's why we added the commentator Bob Cutlass, voiced by Bob Costas, actually pointing that out, saying it was illegal, in order to have Darrell Waltrip's character, Daryl Cartrip, say, he's just giving him a little bump draft.
Yeah! Now that's what I'm talking about. Hey, how come the only one celebrating is me? Huh?
A fantastic performance by Michael Keaton of Chick Hicks. This scene where he's accepting the trophy was so much fun. He kept ad-libbing the funniest lines in this, and many of these lines that we used are from his own ad-libs. When Richard Petty came to record the voice of the King, his wife Linda came along, and in talking to Linda, I just fell in love with her and her voice. And so I asked her if she wanted to be in the movie, and he said, well, what kind of car would you be if you were the wife of the King? And she said, I'd be a station wagon, of course. And I said, okay, station wagon. She told me the story how she'd bring all the kids to the races, and she'd, make sandwiches on the back tailgate of the station wagon during the races. So I asked her, what color would your character be? And she'd go, why, petty blue, of course. And petty blue is an actual color. Richard Petty said he was finishing the car at the last minute, and he had 1 can of blue paint and 3 cans of white paint left. So he just decided he had no time, so he decided to mix those together and paint the car. And they showed up the next day at this race with this kind of light blue car. And everyone really liked it. It was so different than anything people had seen. And so from that point on, he painted all of his cars that same color. And in fact, the paint company started making a specific blue color called Petty Blue.
Still, if there's ever anything I can do for you, just let me know.
I sure appreciate that. Thank you. Actually, there is one thing.
When Mater first asked Lightning McQueen, do you think I can get a ride in one of your helicopters? McQueen said yes, but he couldn't wait to get out of this town. But to actually finally see him get a ride for his best friend, it showed how far this character has come. I love to give the characters that we have fallen in love with exactly what they wanted at the end of a movie. And with Luigi and Guido, the fact they're such Ferrari fans, we had to have a Ferrari show up at the end to buy tires from them in their shop. So we worked with Ferrari, and they were fantastic to work with. And they wanted me to use their new model, the F430. Twist my arm. Okay, I'll use the F430. But we really, really wanted to have Michael Schumacher, the Ferrari Formula One world champion, to do the voice. And the fantastic folks at Ferrari made it happen. We recorded Michael up in Montreal when he was there for the 2005 Canadian Grand Prix. And it was so exciting. And he was great. He actually did his lines in 4 languages, in English, German, French, and Italian. In his Italian version, he did it in the accent that comes from Maranello, the town where Ferraris are built.
Racing headquarters here.
Really? Oh, well, there goes the town.
I really missed you, Sally.
Well, I create feelings in others they themselves don't understand, and blah, 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 blah.
Cars is, without question, the most personal story and the most personal film that I've made. As I mentioned, my father was a parts manager at a Chevrolet dealership in the small town that I grew up in. My mother was an art teacher. It's kind of like combining the both sides of my family, as well as the theme of the movie, that Lightning McQueen learning that the journey in life is a reward, is something that I actually learned. I learned it from my wife, Nancy, and from my sons, Joey, Ben, PJ, Sam, and Jackson, on our 2-month cross-country motorhome trip where we traveled on Route 66. It's a very personal story for me also, in that so much of the movie was inspired by the people that we met on Route 66 and the people that we met in the NASCAR world, the race car drivers, the team owners, the racetrack owners, as well as the fantastic fans and all the people we met in Detroit, the auto designers, as well as the auto restorers, and even just the people who love cars. I was dedicated to making this movie for all of them. I have such respect for all these people, and we wanted to have this movie celebrate all aspects of the automotive world. We were dedicated to making this movie authentic. Not only did we want to entertain audiences, boys, girls, men, women, audiences of all ages, with the story and the emotion and the humor of the film, but we are also dedicated in making it authentic to these people who work in the automotive industry, be it in Detroit, the racing industry, or on Route 66. We wanted them to know that we loved and respected what we learned from them. And it was tremendous inspiration. Remembering back to sitting in Slugman, Arizona, in the barbershop of Angel Delgadillo, and hearing his personal story of the day that the interstate opened and all of the cars bypassed their town, and how overnight their town died. Tears came to our eyes as he was telling this story, because he loved the people coming by and visiting him. He said, you never knew who you were going to meet, but you knew you were going to meet someone special. And that was taken away from us. It was such an important moment to hear that. At that point, I looked at Joe, and he and I knew we found our movie. And so this movie is really dedicated to all those people and all the amazing people at Pixar that worked so hard on this film. One of the most difficult things that we did in the movie Cars was to create a believable world where cars are alive and there were no humans. Joe Ranft and I made that decision really early on in the development of this movie. But it was difficult to make the world believable. Once we did that, we realized that we could take things that we, the audience, find familiar and show it to you how it would appear in the car world. And all of a sudden, it's fresh, it's funny. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to do an in-joke that everybody would get by having the drive-in theater be restored and have a grand opening, but the movie they would show would be a car version of our own movie, Toy Story. We called it Toy Car Story. We also thought, well, which one would be better? Would it be Toy Story or a car version of Monsters Incorporated that we call Monsters Trucks Incorporated, or even A Bug's Life, being that a bug is like a Volkswagen? So we had a screening at Disney where we thought, well, let's see which one gets the biggest laugh. So we put all three of them up there. And everyone at this screening just howled with laughter at all of them. So we decided to keep them all. And then we had the idea that one of the things that is in every Pixar movie is the voice of John Ratzenberger. And we thought, wouldn't it be hilarious to pay tribute to that or to make fun of that and to have John Ratzenberger's character, Mac the Truck, be watching the show. And every time his character from one of these movies comes up, he thinks that that guy is the best actor in the world. And so we did this, and it is so fun to watch this with audiences because it is an in-joke that they can get. And we're really, really proud of this little section. For me, it was a 6-year journey making this film. And I miss my partner, Joe. We lost him right at the very end of the production. He was taken from us, and we dedicated this movie to him. And he is alive forever in this film, in Mater and in every bit of this film. And as you watch this movie, you will be watching Joe Ranft for the rest of our lives. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is John Lasseter signing off.